All right, students, this afternoon we're going to thoroughly go over in detail the second part of the H3E-Datacom laboratory exam. In the previous video, we carefully covered and discussed the first part, making sure to explain all the important points. That is Section 1, Module X, which is the campus area. Today, our main focus will be on the second module, which is the external campus area. In the overall exam topology, it mainly occupies this position. It's the area outlined by the red line here. Let me first give a general overview of the technical content being assessed in this campus area. Mainly, it's divided into two major modules. The first module is this area we're focusing on now. Within the entire exam project, this represents the layout of a company. We refer to this as its external or off-site layout. In this campus area, we will be using controllers in the future, which means using Campus to manage the corresponding devices here and then pushing down some configurations to them. To complete tasks related to internal user access authentication for this company. After authentication, users will obtain the corresponding permissions, whether it's mutual access between users or access to internal resources. So, this is our current setup, including all the wired and wireless access points inside the office, as well as our access control measures. In addition to that, on this side, we have one of our store locations. That is to say, in this project, there are actually many stores like this one. As the company is relatively large in scale, it has a great number of branches nationwide, and they need to connect with the main office through our service provider for interconnection. So in this context, we also need to consider the deployment of SD-WAN technology. Therefore, we can say there are two main categories in total. Most of our configurations are focused on the internal network of the external campus. For these basic internal campus services, the configuration is handled accordingly. In addition, for SD-WAN, which involves interconnection between external branches and all our stores, we also need to set up some configurations related to C-WAN. This is the general structure, so next let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at the specific real-time steps. Here, let's move to the second part. In the documentation for the second part, at this point, we've also abstracted the topology in the second section. This structure is specifically for this part itself. You can also take a look. On the left side, we have our external area, which is a campus. It includes an exit, a core switch, 2 aggregation computers, 2 access points, and 1 AP. There are also 2 access terminals here, wired terminals. In addition, on the store side, we have the exit router. In the middle, we are interconnected through the service provider. Okay, here we'll go straight to looking at the requirements. The corresponding materials will be distributed to everyone later, so let's just focus on the requirements. Let's take the first requirement as an example. The top part is an introduction to the current status of the project, which we won't go over again. So first of all, this is the initial setup of our current outbound gateway. That is to say, for our out-of-city parks, they and our stores are actually treated as independent sites. So here we will be dealing with some related matters. Let's start with the basic operating steps for this process. First, when you practice in the future, please make sure to log into our exam machine as usual. After logging in successfully, you should open the connector that we currently use in the exam, which is this one right here. Take your time to ensure you are using the correct connector, as this is important for the exam process. Expanded, and after expanding, we expand the list under Y. Among them, we first open the 2 devices, Y sheet and our store. Just open them. That's all we need to do. We can double-click to open them. After opening them, we do a split screen so we can display them first. In this process, it's the same as in the exam room. Here, the username is all admin, and the password is Hwaya123. After coming in, you can first check some of the basic pre-configurations related to the devices. For example, display IP interface. Here, we can take a look at the pre-configurations. Usually, in this section, we use 2 addresses to connect with ours. For interconnection between operators in our current billing set, actually we have multiple billing sets, but in this particular set we use 35.136.1 and 37.138.1. Which addresses do these correspond to? They are... Let me show you these addresses here. I'll draw them for everyone that is within this topology. In fact, the interconnection addresses here correspond to these specific ones. Look, on our left side, this one on the left is... Here, on the left, this is our Y port, which corresponds to this device of ours. In this device, there are actually 2 cables here. One is port 9 and the other is port 10. So the interconnection here is on our 35 segment. This is the 35 segment. On our side, we use port 1 as the endpoint, and the carrier uses port 254. So on our side, it's the 36 segment, specifically 36.1 and 36.254. That's the address. In addition, on the store side on this device, we also use the same outbound connection. We connect to the carrier through port 9, and port 10. Here, this is the 37.0 segment, and this is the 38.0 segment. For both segments, the endpoints are 0.1 and 0.254. So let's first check that our current configuration is correct. Now, what we need to do is start registering with our controller. In other words, in this environment, we need to have our two outbound devices register with the controller first. So here, we just need to enter the corresponding command. Just type in the corresponding command. Let's operate here first. For us, the peer address is 192.168.18.203. During the exam, this address and the port we register with may be different. You can refer to the hints in the document provided on your desktop. In our rack, it's 18.03. As for the port we're using here is 10,020. Now let's register it first. After registering it, we can start looking at our next requirement. Let's continue to the next part. Alright, so here we'll first register it with the controller. After that, we'll have a basic network planning table for our test environment. Later, we'll configure things according to the details in this planning table, such as the AS number and the IP address pool we've assigned. We'll just follow these requirements to do the configuration. In the future, everyone should also use this document for configuration. We can also take a screenshot of these parameters. This way, when we do the configuration later, everyone can clearly see that these parameters are actually marked in our documentation. So when taking the exam in the future, just configure according to these parameters. Now let's go back to our exam machine and get started. All right, let's log into our NCE. All right, then let's start configuring. You can use either Google Chrome or Firefox, whichever you're more comfortable with. Here we'll use Google Chrome. For example, enter 192.168.18.203. Here, the port number we're using is also 10,020. Here we are using All right, we can just directly access 18.203. The port will redirect automatically. During the exam, just follow the instructions in the desktop document for the port number. Let me minimize this for now. Here we log into the corresponding tenant. Each rack has a different tenant. The tenant for the rack I'm currently logged into is user 005. It's the same during the exam. This tenant, there will be some differences. Also, the login password for each tenant is different to prevent you from accidentally logging into someone else's tenant and making configuration mistakes. Here, after we log in, everything here has already been completed after restoring the billing. Okay, so after the initial setup, once we come in, we select the corresponding version here. Let me switch the language here. Let's click on Planning. I'll switch the language first, change it to English. So in the future, when you take the exam, you'll see a page just like the one shown in my screenshot. So let's go ahead and start configuring. First, let's click on the SD1 section. So based on the requirements we have here, you can see the initial parameters that we need to configure. We just need to select according to these parameters. Here we're dealing with a basic tenant, so there's no need to make any changes here. Of course, we need to scroll down a little bit. After scrolling down, we need to turn off the currently activated security configuration that is related to encryption here. We do not need to enable encryption in this particular case. After disabling encryption, we need to submit the changes in the controller. For every step after configuring a page, you need to submit it. Please pay attention to this. Once we've finished this part, we can start configuring the virtual network. Here, there's an AS number, so just configure it according to the parameter provided in our documentation earlier, which is 65003, 65,003. After configuring this here, let's continue. Like here we have a community attribute that also needs to be configured. This is the community attribute pool, and you just need to keep it consistent with the one above. 6003, then click the plus sign to add it in. After adding it, that's all set. Down below, here we just select the simple mode. After choosing simple mode, the address here is the one we just provided. As for the image processing, I think I accidentally flipped it earlier, so I'll flip it back here. This is called 10.99.0.0/16, which is what we're configuring here. This is set according to the address pool plan we made earlier, so this is 10.99.0.0. After configuring it, click this plus sign. Only by doing this will it take effect, so add it in. After adding it, we just need to click on this page here, and the configuration is done. Just click OK. So these parameters above are configured in different interfaces. So we've actually finished the basic configuration for now. There's one thing I need to mention to everyone, which is about this attribute. In our current version, you need to configure this attribute. If in the future you encounter some older versions of controllers, they might not require this 65,003 configuration. We'll explain the specific differences in detail in the documentation later on. Okay, so next we'll start working on the site design section. In site design, we need to create the corresponding site names. Right now we have two sites. One is the extension area and the other is the store. So here we first have a set Y. Be sure not to make any mistakes when entering the site name. You really need to pay attention here. This is set Y. Whether it's uppercase or lowercase, spaces, or the underscore below, you must write everything exactly as specified. There can't be any spaces in the middle or mistakes in capitalization or inconsistent indentation. None of that is acceptable. Otherwise, it will give an error when you import it later. Here we select the devices within WAN district, which involves AR. Right now, we just have AR, routers, switches, and our AC. So here, check the corresponding product. For the type, you can't select the wrong one either. When we import the table later, in fact, there are only these devices within the WAN district. If you select more, it will also cause an import error, so pay attention to this part. After creating this site, just click OK. Next, let's also create the store. Just now we created the set by, and now we're creating the set store. We need to pay attention to the case when naming this store. Make sure there are no mistakes. Store 1 is called set store 1, and inside it, there's only the AR device, because as we saw earlier in the distribution, there's actually just one border router. So here, don't select any device types that don't exist. Once we've made our selections, this step is actually finished. Next, let's take a look at device management. Site design should be based on the sites in our diagram, so now in device management, we'll import these devices. The exam process is the same. For example, some ES numbers, ESN numbers, and device roles in the device templates will all be included in the Excel template used during the exam, so everyone should follow accordingly. During the exam, just use the provided template and import the corresponding information directly. Let's take a look at where this template is located. The corresponding template is located on our C drive at this location. Select the one with EN, open it, and then click Start Import. After the import is complete, you will see in the lower right corner that we have a total of 8 devices. Here, we click OK to import it. After importing, you need to check the import results. It will display here that all 8 devices were successfully imported with no failures. That means this step is complete. Later on, you will see the corresponding import results here. You'll see the success status here. In this process, we finally click on our current device management. After a short while, these devices will be considered successfully imported. Once they're imported, after we finish configuring the corresponding link templates, after a while, the devices will come online. Let's continue. This is our current WAN link template. In the template, we need to create a new one, meaning we need to set up a new template. Just configure this template according to the parameters shown here. First, the name. Let's just follow this. So overall, let's write HCIE here. This will be our template name. After entering the name, we need to create the template below. Since we're connecting through port 9 and port 10 here, we'll enter 0-0-9 in this section. You can copy it here to make things a bit faster. For example, this one is for port 10, and here it's also port 9 and port 10. So keep 9 on top and 10 below. Then we select its transport network, which means we need to configure its routing domain here. So as we discussed above, it's the internet. What we're mainly doing here is setting the lower part as Internet 1. You need to be aware of these two and set them up in this way. You can see that the diagram above will also update accordingly. For the upper part, we don't need to do any additional configuration. For the lower part, we need to make a change. Set it to blank. Just click OK here. After clicking for the upper part, we just follow the default southbound setting as written there. In other words, we don't need to make any changes to it. No modifications are necessary. Next, we just need to click OK. Now our basic template has been successfully created. At this point, if we go back to device management and take a look, you'll see that our 2 outbound devices have already passed. Just now, the CLI, that is the manual command line method, has already been registered. So here you'll see that we're now in a normal registration state. The green color indicates that the device is currently under the control of our management center. Next, let's continue and start the zero-touch provisioning process. So here in the provisioning mode, ZDP, we select the corresponding mode, and then we continue with the next steps. Let's proceed according to this table and start the process. First, let's select Set WAU. Here you need to pay attention when making the corresponding configuration. During the provisioning process, you need to select the correct site. Don't make a mistake here, because if you do, rolling back can be very troublesome. Let's first select the Set Wide configuration. In other words, it's better to configure addresses from small to large. This makes it easier to remember and helps you develop good configuration habits. Here in the provisioning mode, make sure to select according to our requirements. Don't make a mistake here. Choose CP. After making the selection, we then choose to import the template here. Just now we created an HCIE template, which is for our dual line outbound link. Import that template here. Once it's imported, you'll see the corresponding interfaces below. At this point, just click the operation button on the right. After clicking the operation button, we'll create them one by one. The first one is our port 9. All these parameters can remain unchanged, so we just proceed all the way down. Here, the main thing we need to adjust is these parameters. As we saw earlier, our interconnection address is 35, 36, 37, 38, and the external campus is 35, 36. For the store, 37, 38 is its interconnection address. You can see it right here. You might remember this spot from earlier. These are the ones. At this point, we set these up. This is my local end, and for the remote end, it's .54, which means the remote end is my gateway. So here you can choose to copy it if you want. Copying is an option. All right, let's just copy it here. It's 10.25.35.1, and below that's 35.254. All right, as for the subnet mask, we just enter the 24-bit mask here. Now, if we want to make further changes below, that's where we set the uplink and downlink capacity. In this section, we just enter the bandwidth. Let's just put 1000 here. All right, keep these parameters as they are, and let's configure all 4 interfaces. Once this part is done, we're finished. After configuring the first one, you'll see a prompt indicating that the configuration is complete. Here, let's change it to 36.1. Then we select the option below. This one is 36.254. Right, 24 here. And then this side is 1000, and this side is also 1000. All right, after finishing the configuration, remember to click OK and submit here. Then we'll move on to configure the next one. The next one we're going to configure is the store. Okay, let's continue and configure the store. We're going to set it up as well. Be sure to select the correct option here. Make sure to choose the corresponding one. Here we'll add the appropriate entry. Before adding, remember to select the template here. After selecting the template, these 2 interfaces will appear in this area. Here we're dealing with 37 and 38, just like before. So we'll set them up accordingly. Here this one is called 37, and then this is 38, 37.254, and then 24. Here the configuration is repetitive. On the NCE, many of our configurations involve repetitive steps, nothing too complicated. This is just a basic tie interconnection configuration. Here it's 38. When taking the exam, remember that during the configuration process you shouldn't be too anxious, just take your time. What we aim for is to get it right the first time, not how fast you can do it. All right, let's go ahead and submit it here as well. All right, so with this step we're done as well. That is, we followed the parameters we mentioned earlier. You see, our current uplink and downlink are bundled, and the switch is also bundled. The switch is something we specified here. So actually, we've already used up the diagram, and the remaining parameters here are the same. When we were designing earlier, we set them up according to this. Remember? Earlier, we also chose the empty option and selected the transport network. We set everything up according to the parameters here. Later on, when you get more practice and become proficient, you might not need to look at the requirements anymore. But in the early stages, if you want to deepen your technical understanding, you can still refer to the requirements. Actually, after completing this step, the 2 devices at your exit will briefly go offline, and after a while, they'll come back online. This is normal. So we won't go into the technical principles here. The devices will come back online in a moment, and that basically means we've completed this step. Let's continue with the next steps. Essentially, these devices are connected to the controller through 2 static routes. So they have static default routes. We need to configure those here. For the configuration of our underlay network, it doesn't really matter which configuration you do first, but remember, when selecting the site, you must choose it first. So here we can also try configuring the store first, as long as you don't select the wrong one. Here, we carefully select the corresponding store from the available options, then proceed to choose the WAN part of the routing configuration. At this stage, we need to add a static route specifically for our outbound traffic. Since we're choosing the static option here, let's go ahead and add a static route and create it right here in this section. This ensures that our outbound traffic is properly routed according to our requirements. We're using eSport1 here, which is our branch. Under port 9, we'll add a route. By default, it's 0.0.0.0, so we'll set it to 0, then fill this in, and click OK. Yesterday we were here and we needed to select this port number 10. We can also add another one, which means we create another route here. So here we select this physical port, paste it in, and click OK. That's it. After we submit here, you'll see that in the lower right corner, there's no longer that submission interface. This has already taken effect, so that's our first part. Second, when we select this set Y, it's the same process to configure the routing for it. Choose static routing, then here create the first port, which is port 9, and then select the second port, which is port 10. Here we write 2 static routes in each one. Right now we're setting up a basic interconnection. Once we finish connecting, our basic configuration is just one step away, the final connection. In this environment, set 1 is RR, so we need to use set store 1 to connect to our set Y. So here we just need to make the corresponding selection, check this size store 1, and then here click connect. The connection is to our set Y. Then just go ahead and connect it. Okay, wait a moment for it to finish connecting. Now you'll see a graphical display like this here. Up to this point, our configuration for requirement 2.1 is complete. In other words, at this stage, the initial configuration for the gateway at the exit is finished. So at this point, we've used the command line method for both sites, have been managed and controlled. Then based on our current WAN side basic network planning table, we use this WAN connection template. Yes, using this template to perform the basic initial setup for the WAN at both sites. So this completes the first part of our gateway's initial configuration. This part accounts for 2 points out of the total score, which is relatively good. Let's keep going and talk a bit more, okay? Let's talk a bit more since the external part will take us a bit longer to complete. So here we can wait a bit for the equipment, especially when we get to the process of going online in a moment. Basically, let's start talking about the second point. The second point is about the internal equipment management within the external affairs POC, which means we need to bring that large group of devices below us online. That is, bring the core, aggregation, and access devices online. So how do we configure this? Let's go back to our interface, still in the SD-WAN section. Then here we click on Virtual Network Configuration, and in here click Create. After creating it, we set up our internal management network here, which we call, as we say, Management. This is also something we can see inside here. That is, in the external environment, it will prompt us that we are connecting through something called Management. Next, what related configurations do we need to set up here? We'll just go ahead and do it directly. I won't walk everyone through the requirements, otherwise it would be too slow, so we'll call it Management. All right, once we've finished creating this and after making sure that everything is set up as we want, there's nothing else we need to check here at this stage. Then we can simply go ahead and click on the Next button. After clicking, we need to add this site here, ensuring that it is included properly so that everything is correctly configured and ready to go. For management, we're only targeting set Y because Y is an internal device and we need to manage it, so there's no need to select the branch site. We click OK, and after adding it, don't forget this step. Here we need to click Finish accordingly. So after we finished adding it, we added here in the management section, you can see that set Y is listed here. Next, we look at our SD-WAN interconnection. Here we need to create an SD-WAN interconnection. Let's shrink this a bit. For creating the SD-WAN interconnection during the exam, you can also create it elsewhere. In other words, creating it at this location works the same way. Right here, you can also create the SD-WAN interconnection. We'll proceed here according to what I just mentioned. Let's do the steps here. Okay, click on SD-WAN interconnection here. After clicking, we need to give it a name. We'll enter PNP here, which is also required in our documentation. Then, to create it, select the gateway here, which is our Y. Next, select the Layer 3 main interface. During the interface selection process, we'll add 0-0-1 here, which is ours. 0-0-1. This is from our diagram, so just follow the interface in our topology diagram and write the corresponding one. We'll write it here again. When you add it here, you can see that you need to select port number 1. This is something you need to manually deploy and add. As for the corresponding address, here we just fill it in according to the address in our topology planning table. The address we use here is 10.2.1.1. This is our address. After filling it in, we click on the Configure option here. Let's take a look. Here, we need to enable this feature. After enabling it, we need to select one here. So we need to add this option, option 148. What is this for? It's for a cloud platform address, and we need to make some basic parameter modifications here. So what are the main parameters we need to modify? The first one is this AG, which refers to the agent management mode. We need to change the mode here. We need to set it to use the IP address, so we'll be using the IP address for this. Besides that, we also need to modify the domain at the end here. We need to change it to our current controller address. What should we change it to? We'll set it to our controller address. 192.168.18.203. During the exam, this address should be set according to the actual address assigned in the exam room, as different racks will have different addresses. The power port is 10,020, and there are no other issues here. Just make sure this configuration is set up properly. Alright, so this is the configuration modification we're dealing with right now. After you finish making these changes, just click OK here to confirm. If you're just starting out, after you've completed the steps, you can come back and check to make sure everything here has already taken effect. After clicking, we just need to confirm here. Okay, so now, after completing this step, we click Next and then click Finish. Once this is done, the corresponding configuration will actually be generated on our Y-Sport device. We can go to the device and take a look. So basically we've separated it. So for our device, there will now be some corresponding configurations here. For example, we can go into the G0-0-1 interface. Didn't we just configure its E port? Here we can use the command display this to check and display, and you'll see here that we've actually added a VP instance, which is VPN1. This is actually our management VPN, and we've added a virtual network, and this name is, we can write it here, just display. We can take a look at this instance here. Display IP, and we enter this VPN instance. Here you can see that this VPN1 is the one that, well, just now NCE proactively created and edited for you. Actually, you can customize this name. But if I don't define it myself, well, when we created the management just now, that name is not actually the default name. If you go back to the step where we created the virtual network, you'll see that there is actually a VN instance name below, and the exam didn't require us to change it. So sometimes if you see this configuration on the device, just knowing its management is enough. At this point for us, this Y port will assign the IP address and the cloud platform address downward. Correspondingly, the downstream devices are these ones. That is the switches below it, right? Look at this spot. These are the switches below it. For example, this one here, it's unconfigured by default, so it will use DHCP to obtain the controller's address.